The member for Kew.
Very much, Deputy Speaker, and I too rise to speak on the State Civil Liability Police Informants Bill 2024. And can I start by thanking the member for Malvern for his contribution in this place and for outlining so clearly why the opposition, the Liberals and the Nationals, vehemently oppose this piece of legislation. And it's good to hear that we'll be joined by the Greens in opposing this piece of legislation as well. It's an extraordinary abuse of power to bring this piece of legislation before the Parliament, but to do so in such a rushed and, I quote, urgent manner is even more concerning. To have 1 hour to debate a piece of legislation that will limit the rights of Victorian citizens in terms of how they can approach justice in this state is extraordinary. But unfortunately, Deputy Speaker, it is simply not surprising to come from this Labor government, this arrogant government. And I think it speaks volumes that we're only going to hear from one member of the government on this piece of legislation this afternoon. Unfortunately, the member for Elba Park drew the straw as usual and had to speak and put on the record outrageous positions on behalf of this government in terms of limiting the rights of Victorian citizens. The piece of legislation before us, Deputy Speaker, seeks to use extraordinary powers of the state to shield itself from the damage caused by its own actions. It's both retrospective in nature and unprecedented. And to have only 1 hour to debate it before it's guillotined off this afternoon speaks volume to the level of embarrassment this government must have in bringing a piece of legislation before this Parliament. This government time and time again tries to silence its own citizens in terms of the concerns that they have with the approach this government takes and the mess this government finds itself in time and time again. This government is bringing forward this legislation this afternoon that completely undermines the rule of law in this state. It completely undermines the idea of equality before the law and suggests that the government itself should be above the law. And the opposition this afternoon, as the member for Malvern rightly outlined, is taking a much-needed principled approach to this bill, saying that no government can be above the law. No government can try to silence its critics by using the parliamentary process to ensure that they cannot take action in the courts to find justice in an event where the government has created the mess itself. Now, as has been spoken to today, no one necessarily likes nor agrees with the people of question named in this bill. Nicola Gobbo or Farouk Oman, they may not be people that we agree with, nor do we wish to see supported in any way. But they have a right to bring these claims in the courts. In the case of Mr Oman, his conviction for murder has been squashed as a result of the Lawyer X scandal. The fact that his lawyer was also a police informant goes against the very foundations of our system of justice in this state, the very rule of law that we all come into this place to uphold. And this piece of legislation is designed to protect the state from compensation claims from Nicola Gobbo and Farouk Oman. This is something that the Attorney-General has described as a dark chapter in the state's history. Yet, last year in this place, the government brought forward the Human Source Management Bill, which sought to, in fact, put in place a model in which lawyers can continue to be police informants on their clients. So on the one hand, we have the Attorney-General saying this is a dark day for Victoria. We need to put an end to this dark chapter. But on the other hand, we have actually seen legislation pass through this Parliament under this government that allows it to happen time and time again. This is conduct that the High Court has called reprehensible. And the Victoria Court of Appeal found that Ms Gobbo's conduct subverted the accused's right to a fair trial and went to the very foundations of the system of criminal trial. There was accordingly a substantial miscarriage of justice. We saw a royal commission that was conducted, multi-million-dollar royal commission, a 2-year investigation by the Office of the Special Investigator, and of course, coming out of that, the former High Court Justice Geoffrey Nettle attempted to prosecute a number of people over the criminal conduct in the Lawyer X scandal, but was thwarted at every opportunity thanks to the Labor-appointed DPP. We've seen a Royal Commission that cost millions of dollars. We've seen another 2-year investigation. We've seen legislation come to this place that is in fact contrary to the advice of that Royal Commission, the findings of our highest courts, the Court of Appeal here in Victoria and the High Court, which found it reprehensible conduct. Yet we now have a situation where the state is trying to legislate its liability away under the Lawyer X scandal. Now, as the member for Malvern has said, this is a friendless piece of legislation, and we've heard from various bodies, including the Law Institute of Victoria, which has said the LIV believes that this fundamentally undermines the rule of law and administration of justice. The state has enormous power over its citizens, and for it to legislate out of liability when the power is wielded improperly is wrong. Nothing could be closer to the truth. The state must allow for this to continue. This is not something that has happened overnight. This urgent piece of legislation that has come before the Parliament today must be rushed through and debated for only an hour. These issues have been in question for years. These court proceedings have been in question for years. Yet as we get closer to the trial date, the government comes in here and tries to limit the liability of these parties. It goes against the very system of justice and democracy in this country and undermines the rule of law that we, as members of Parliament, are meant to come in here and uphold. Deputy Speaker, this is an extraordinary abuse of power by this government. We know that they are trying to limit their liability because they are concerned about the cost of what that liability may be at the end of the day. We know that this government cannot manage money, but the result of that cannot be limiting the rights of their citizens and undermining the rule of law at every single opportunity. I don't think it comes as any surprise to any of us on this side of the chamber that this government would approach this bill in this way, but it simply defies the very foundations of our parliamentary system and our legal system to introduce a bill like this to limit the liability of their citizens and to put in place limitations on how citizens can approach justice in this state. We as the opposition oppose this bill and call on others to do so.
The time